and hand it over to you, Bjorn.
Yeah, thanks very much, Fernanda. It's great to have the opportunity to present here. We'll just start sharing my presentation. So my name's Bjorn Bergman. I'm a project manager for SkyTruth. And today I'm going to be talking about a couple of our open source platforms and how you can use them for vessel tracking with AIS data and satellite imagery. And a few words about SkyTruth first. This is a small nonprofit based in the US. It was founded in 2001. And we're building pre-conservation technology using Earth observation data. Primarily today, I'm going to talk about AIS data. So if you're familiar with vessel tracking, this is really going to be your primary source for figuring out how ships are moving all over the ocean. And so here you can see just a map of processed AIS data from Global Fishing Watch. This is about 300,000 ships. And you can see patterns of movement, including shipping lanes. If you look in the Pacific, you can see fishing boats that are operating exclusively at the edges of exclusive economic zones. So that's the patterns that you see out there. And I'll give a little technical introduction to AIS data. This is, the acronym is the Automatic Identification System. Ships have this initially to avoid collisions. So ships would be broadcasting their position a few times a minute, and any ship that was within 15 or 20 miles would pick up this position, and they would have it on their navigation screen. However, this data also can be picked up by orbiting satellites and by terrestrial antennas. And so that's how there are now commercial and public databases with this tracking information. And for those of you that are interested in really digging into the technical details of AIS, here you can see a raw AIS message at the top of the screen and then how it's decoded. This is a positional message. The AIS is actually a really complicated data source. But it's far more than just positions and speed and course. And so sometimes in your investigations, really digging into some of the other AIS fields can be pretty useful. So here you see all of the different fields from a message. Many of these fields are to do with coordinating communications between ships that are in a particular area, so that they can all receive the different messages. Also, if you're interested, here are a few websites that I recommend for really digging into these details. And so now I'm going to show just how we can investigate an incident that came up back in March, and how we can use AIS data and satellite imagery to find out more about what was really happening. So on March 10th, a U.S. Navy vessel off the coast of England, chartered to carry jet fuel, was at anchor, and a cargo ship collided with it. And this initially got a lot of attention because of the connection with the U.S. Navy, and that the cargo ship, the captain was a Russian national. And so in the article we have the two vessels are named. And now I'm just going to exit the presentation here and show my other screen so I can give a quick demo of how we could get public AIS data to do more investigation. So I'm going to go to the Global Fishing Watch site. You should see that on the screen now, and then opening up the map. And so what you're seeing here are fishing activity shown in green and yellow here. But something that's really useful is that Global Fishing Watch also processes all of the AIS from other ships. So we can also look for the ship that we're interested for the collision. So this was Stella Immaculate. Okay, so there's quite a few here, and it's actually more useful if I can search for the one of the identifying numbers. So I'm just going to search quickly for MMSI. MMSI is the tracking number that is associated with AIS. So going back to the map here, and I will just put that number in, and here we have the Stella Immaculate. So now I'm loading that track onto the screen, and I also want to adjust the time bar below just to show the track around the time in March when the collision occurred. So I'm going to select from March 9th to 11th. And if we zoom in here, we can see this, the track of the vessel as it was approaching the English coast and then at anchor there. So that's one of the vessels, and then to add the other one, I'll search. The name was So Long. And I believe it was this one here. So I'm also going to copy the MMSI number and then search in the map here. Okay, and here it is. So also add that. And here we see the two vessels then. The So Long, the smaller cargo ship showing up in green. And then if we look here, we can actually pinpoint the moment of the collision, more or less, that this was on March 10th at 9 a.m. Now I'm also going to go ahead and download the AIS data for these two vessels. So, and I have to register here quickly to be able to do that, or just to log in. So this is, sorry, what was that? Anyway, so I'm logged in here, and now I'm going to download the tracks for the So Long and the Stella Immaculate. You have two options, CSV or GeoJSON. Both of these should work on monitor, which I'll show next. So downloading the track for each of these vessels is a CSV. And then I had pulled these before, so I'll just show how they show up. So you can see the coordinates, course, speed, and the timestamp. So this is gives you quite a bit of information to work with. One thing I'll note is that I'm going to load these tracks into our monitor application, and in order to do that, I had to change the coordinates so that it says explicitly longitude and latitude instead of lon and lat. All right, so from here, I will now go to our monitor application. So this is monitor.skytruth.org. And this is a really versatile platform for loading your own data and for comparing it with satellite imagery. And I will go ahead and add in the files that I downloaded. So first, here is the so long here. So here we see the vessel track for those for a few days before the collision. And then I will add in the second track from the Stena Immaculate. And I'll just switch this to a different color. So it's the two tracks are distinct. I'm going to increase the opacity a little bit. So we can look in detail and see the actual AIS positions on this map. We can see more details about the precise timestamp. And where this platform is really useful is that we can add in satellite imagery. So you can see what's available. Here you see some different sources. So Sentinel-1 is satellite radar. This doesn't give much detail, but it does. Large ships do show up clearly, is kind of bright specks on the image. Sentinel-2 is optical imagery from the European Space Agency. And so we know that the collision happened on the 10th. So I'm just going to search for imagery around those days. And there's an image here from the 11th. So you can see the coast of England there. And then if we would zoom into the Anchorage site where the collision happened. Now this is the day following the collision. There wasn't an image available from the 10th. But we can see that there is a ship visible. So this ship here is the Stena Immaculate, the U.S. Navy vessel that was struck. And if we would pick out the AIS position from exactly the timestamp of Sentinel-2, so this is 11 a.m. on the March 11th, we could really pinpoint and prove that this was the vessel that we were investigating. So what about the other vessel? This is something we'd have to look for or have some additional information. We did hear that it had drifted south after the collision, and so it appeared in this area here to the south with a smoke plume. Let me see if it's coming up here. And quite a bit closer to the coast. So it was a danger to, for pollution or for anything in the vicinity. All right, and just exit here quickly. And let's see, I actually accidentally closed my presentation, but one thing I did want to show you was another platform that SkyTruth has set up, which is Cerulean. So if we go to cerulean.skytruth.org, and this platform is this is set up to view possible oil slicks around the world. All right, I should be seeing the map here, cerulean.skytruth.org. And So this is detecting, you can see there's some filter options on the left. So we can filter by this MMSI number that I had used to look up the ships before. And then we can also look for cases where possible oil slicks are associated with offshore infrastructure. So, oil platforms, for instance, here we can see what looks like, one platform that's associated with many different slicks. All right, so, here's the platform location. And if we wanted to, we could, copy out this latitude and longitude and paste it into Monitor to investigate a little bit further. What we can see on satellite imagery. But here on Cerulean, we can see that there are a number of different slicks with, significant volumes that are emanating from this platform. And what we're seeing underneath here, the imagery is Sentinel-1 radar imagery, where whenever there's a slick on the water, this creates a calmer area that appears darker in the image. So, that's one type of slick we're detecting in Cerulean. The other is slicks that are associated with a particular vessel, and they typically have this long pattern here. And if we would look at the imagery, we would see the vessel appearing. I think it'll show up here. Just so here's the underlying radar imagery, and this is the vessel. So these slicks are typically associated with either bilge dumping or tank washing events, where some oily waste is dumped and is a streak behind the vessel. All right, so those are the two platforms I wanted to share with you, Monitor and Cerulean. Both of these are free open source platforms that anyone can register and use. And also, you can see a lot of our work on our website, SkyTruth.org. My particular area of investigation is in AIS falsification, which is also a concern. And I don't have time to get into that now, but you can see some articles that we've done on the website. And feel free to get in contact with us. My email is bjorn@skytruth.org. All right, let me pass this on to Delger.
Yeah, thank you, Bjorn. So hi, everyone. My name is Delger. I'm a journalist in the US, calling in from Washington, D.C. Yeah, and for the past few years, I've worked at a couple different newsrooms, mostly covering climate and the environment. And I have a background sort of in science journalism more broadly, too. And let me just pull up a little presentation I want to share with you guys. All right, can people see my slides? We can. Great. Let me just go into slideshow mode. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about this project that I did over the past year through the Pulitzer Center, through their ocean reporting network. And I want to give a disclaimer that, this project, it probably isn't what you typically think of when you think of like OSINT for journalism, because I wasn't doing like a hardcore investigation into like specific instances of wrongdoing or anything like that. This was a more explanatory reporting project. But I did rely a lot on like publicly available data sets, public records, these kinds of sources of information. And what I want to show you today is like how you can bring, this OSINT spirit or like frame of mind into all kinds of reporting, into all kinds of stories even more explanatory, sciencey ones as well. And I think some of the sources of data and information on the ocean, there are things that could be useful jumping off points for other journalists to do more investigative stories as well. And I didn't work alone on this project. I was lucky enough to collaborate with the graphics team at the New York Times Climate Desk for some of these stories. I worked with some very talented photographers. So this photo is by one of them, by Ian Bates, and of course, Fernanda and others from the Pulitzer Center also advised me throughout this project. Um, yeah, so just for context, before I dive into the data stuff, I want to show you this graph, which is kind of what got me started on this project, sent me down this path. This was done by a former graphics editor at the New York Times, Nadia Popovich, and I wrote the story that went along with it back in April 2024. And what these top two lines of the graph show are sea surface temperatures in 2023 and 2024. And you can see that they're just much higher by pretty wide margins from all the years that came before, at least in recent history. And a lot of news publications at the time covered just the fact that these temperature records were happening, and a lot also covered what extreme heat means for coral reefs, like in terms of coral reef bleaching from heat stress. But I just kind of felt like as journalists, we were just scratching the surface of what climate change and, in particular, extreme heat means for marine ecosystems more broadly, for all kinds of habitats, not just corals, for fisheries, and for people who depend on fisheries and resources from the ocean. So I pitched this project to the Pulitzer Center as kind of I guess it's an investigation in a way of how climate change and in particular extreme heat is playing out and unfolding in the ocean. And one question in particular that I was especially interested in was whether these events called marine heat waves, these periods of unusually high temperatures in the ocean, like in specific areas of the ocean, like you see on this map here in red, whether these were causing these mass die-offs of fish and other marine life that, we're starting to kind of see more and more in the news. Um, yeah, and this map, which was done by another graphics editor at the Times, Harry Stevens, it's from a story we did showing that these marine heat waves are forming all over the ocean with much greater frequency. And in fact, they're kind of reaching a point where, like, this is the new normal. And there was one about 10 years ago, so kind of here in the middle of this top timeline, in the Pacific off the west coast of North America that really shocked scientists and fishermen and people living on the west coast. And that heat wave actually lasted for more than 3 years. It started at the end of 2013, lasted until the beginning of 2017. And at its most extreme point, the sea surface temperatures were up to 11 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than normal. And the extent of this heat wave on the map was just so big that people started calling it the blob. And these creatures that you see in these photos, they're all victims of the blob in some way. For example, sea stars wasted away from this terrible disease. Seabirds and seals and whales were all starving because there wasn't enough plankton for fish to eat and then not enough fish for these larger animals to eat. And so that's kind of where we started this project, was looking back on what we've learned from this terrible marine heat wave in the 10 years since it happened. And, as a journalist, I didn't go investigating these deaths of these sea creatures myself, because scientists had already done that work. And, other journalists have reported on this over the years too. But something that I did find that was quite recent, published just last year, like around the time I started doing this project, was this pair of reports from the National Marine Sanctuary System here in the US. And yeah, this is something that I would really encourage other journalists to look at. There are these sorts of very big flagship environmental reports that come out every year, things like the IPCC report, for example, or right now there's this huge controversy in the US over this report from the Department of Energy. But I would really encourage people to kind of look at these more obscure reports from specific places, from these kind of more specialized agencies as well, that have these really valuable kind of nuggets of information about things happening in specific places at specific times to specific species and habitats. And that can really give you a lot of like rich and eye-opening information for further reporting. And so what these two reports did was they gave a really thorough kind of post-mortem of what the blob did to species and habitats within these two national marine sanctuaries that are off the coast of California. And this climate vulnerability assessment in particular was really striking. And I interviewed one of the scientists who put these reports together. Her name is Sarah Hutto. And at the time, she worked for these national marine sanctuaries. She said, back in 2014, when this marine heat wave happened, there was this feeling among experts that compared to land, like the ocean is really resilient to climate change. But this event, the blob, made people really rethink how vulnerable the ocean and its species and habitats are. And, that I felt was a pretty like striking, pretty revelatory insight that was totally buried in this really obscure, like 100-page government report that came out 10 years after the event that it's discussing, but something that I think was really worth reporting on and kind of bringing to greater attention. So that brings me back to the OSINT data and information gathering part. There are a lot of these reports and records and data sets where you can find this sort of information. And I really focused on like information about kind of marine biology and the biological impacts of climate change. But of course, there's also a lot of information about out there on like human activity in the ocean as well. But I think like the impacts are often something that journalists struggle to get across. And if you are doing an investigation on some sort of like incident or activity that's going on, digging deeper and kind of trying to find this information about actual impacts to the environment, I think can really elevate your story too and kind of make it more real consequences for readers too. Um, yeah, so I was looking at the response of ecosystems to heat waves, but you could also try to look at the response of marine life in an area like after a pollution event or before and after some extractive activity like mining or drilling, takes place in a location that's of interest to you. And so some of the like actual places I looked for data, I'm just going to exit my slide and I'll just show you really quick where some of these things are. And I won't say too much about like any individual thing. I think this is something that people are probably already familiar with. Like there is data on daily sea surface temperatures around the world going back for many years. This is publicly available. And then if you kind of want to go deeper and like do different things with that data, you can talk to experts at places like the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, their physical sciences laboratory. They work with the data, they like do all sorts of coding with it and come up with things like these forecasts of like when more of these are going to happen. This coral reef watch, I think, is also something that might be familiar to people. This just takes like temperatures around the world, and it kind of says, like, based on the temperatures, you know, what areas of coral reefs are vulnerable to bleaching. One thing that I thought was really interesting and that was new to me when I started doing this project, were these investigations that the US government, NOAA Fisheries, does into the deaths, like if there are a lot of unusual deaths of marine mammals in particular, which have special protections under law, investigations into these like mass die-offs. So that is a really interesting source of information for, you know, if people start to notice one of these die-off events happening, to get more information of how big is it, what could be behind it. And, you know, they have these investigations they've done over the years that are closed now, and then they have ones that are still ongoing. Individual states, sometimes they have hotlines where people can report like big fish kill events. And Florida, for example, maps those reports and makes it publicly available. You can look at, you know, agencies like fisheries agencies and researchers and groups that do these ecosystem reports and like fisheries stock assessments, for example. So these are just a couple of places I looked for things like that. Yeah, stock assessments, they can be like a really good source of information for if you're looking for, you know, well, how is a specific commercial fishery doing? There are a lot of increasing number of like data sets available looking at harmful algal blooms, which is something that, you know, can be exacerbated by extreme heat, for example. There are all of these satellites that have satellite images, also things like algal blooms or just phytoplankton distributions in general. This is from a new satellite called PACE. And then something else I wanted to show was just, you know, something that I rely on a lot in my reporting is just scientific studies, you know, published peer-reviewed scientific studies. And something you can do is, you know, not just interview the authors. I mean, definitely do interview the authors and talk to them about their main findings. But for example, this is one of the studies I looked at, one of the authors I talked to. Then you can also go into the data that they used, and most of the time they make these just publicly available online. And, you know, you can go and dig deeper into their data and kind of find other things, related things to report on. Actually, I'll show you this other study. This was just published, and we just published a story about it. This is kind of trying to project the future of the ocean under climate change and other human pressures. And they really used a lot of different data sets, you know, when they're doing their modeling. And so they made it all publicly available. And so it's like a super dense, super rich source of, if you're looking for data on any of these kinds of human pressures, like fishing by catch, light pollution and stuff, you know, if you just go to where they've published their data, you can find that. Okay, and the very last thing I'll show you is, you know, when I started this project, I was really ambitious and I thought, you know, I would do half of the project about the impacts of climate change and the other half about drivers, you know, in particular, this big expansion of oil and gas activity offshore. And this is a great public free source of information about that. It's run by a group called Global Energy Monitor. And this tool in particular is the Global Oil and Gas Extraction Tracker. So I started reporting on this. I didn't get around to publishing about this as part of this project. It's something I hope to return to and something I really hope other journalists look at. But yeah, this all these dots are like individual oil and gas fields or projects, and you can see the size of them, you can see where they are, you can see kind of what status they're in. And for each individual project, they have this wiki that shows all these details about like what's the company that owns it, um, what are the exact coordinates on the map, what are the sources of information that they used to put this together. So this is just an idea for future reporting, both for myself and for other reporters. And yeah, I think that is all the time I have, so I'll leave it there and I will hand it off to Saroj. And later on, if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks, Delger. Hi, I'm Saroj Pathirana. Let me share my screen with you. Hi, I'm a former BBC journalist. I worked with the BBC Sinhala service and the World Service for 25 years. And since then, after leaving the BBC, I'm now working as a freelance journalist for BBC and Al Jazeera and other international outputs. And at the same time, I got this fellowship together with Delger and others to investigate one very important aspect related to Sri Lanka. And so before, unlike Delger, before I've been covering all the social and political and environmental issues for about 25 years. But now, last year, my focus was mainly on one particular issue, which was the Express Pearl disaster. Many of you might have heard about the disaster that occurred off Sri Lanka about 4 years ago. In May 2019, one of the worst maritime disasters and the worst ever plastic spill involving a ship. So the Express Pearl came to Sri Lanka on 19th of May with a leaking nitric acid container. And then within days, actually, it caught fire, and also within weeks. By June, the ship sank off Sri Lanka, releasing a toxic the chemicals, billions of plastic pellets, plastic noodles, as well as many other chemicals into the ocean. So, as I said, the reason was the leaking nitric acid container, but the ship was accused of not releasing information, not telling the truth to Sri Lankan authorities when the ship arrived in Sri Lanka, that there was a leaking nitric acid container on board. And then as a result of it, Sri Lanka was not prepared to deal with it. So as soon as the ship arrived in Sri Lanka, it caught fire and sank within a couple of days. In addition to chemicals, the cargo ship carried about 1,500 containers. There were other chemicals, there were other toxic materials, and in addition to nitric acid, it was the worst ever disaster was that these plastic noodles. Up until today, 4 years on, these plastic noodles are being collected on the shores of Sri Lanka by about a couple of hundred women, physically, personally collecting on a daily basis, apart from the weekends, from Monday to Friday. These people are collecting, and by now maybe millions of these noodles might have been collected, but millions or billions more are still in the sea, in the ocean. So from the beginning, as I told you, the ship did not reveal information about the nitric acid, leaking nitric acid container. So after the ship caught fire, after that some complete disaster, releasing billions of these plastic noodles, the ship owners were not in no mood to compensate. What happened was what happened was, from the beginning, there was a mystery. What happened? Why they did not reveal information? And thereafter, what happened? And there was no move whatsoever by the ship owners to compensate properly. I mean, properly compensate for the disaster. And then there was an ongoing battle between the Sri Lankan state and the ship owners to where to pay compensation and where to file the action, how to file the action, and there were so many arguments. Then what at the end of the day it was the last option was so as I show here, the ship was accused of not informing Sri Lanka and also deleting emails and hiding information and the missing voyage data recorder. There was so many mysteries involved with this ship disaster. So the only option for the Sri Lankan state was the legal remedy. This is the picture of Sri Lankan Supreme Court. So it took 2 years for the Sri Lankan state to file an action in Singapore seeking compensation, but at the same time, some local fishermen, community leaders, environmentalists, and group of about 10 people joined together, file an action long before the state filed action in Singapore. This group filed an action in Sri Lanka. So in the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka, this a method called fundamental rights petitions. 4 petitions were filed by community leaders and fishermen and clergy. So when I got the Pulitzer fellowship, ORN fellowship, it was my chance to, I reported on the disaster when the disaster occurred for the BBC, but by the time within a couple of years, everybody has forgotten about it, including myself, because Sri Lanka, I mean, you might know Sri Lanka went through a very turbulent period, economic crisis, political upheaval. A president was kicked away by the popular mass uprising. So because of all this, everyone forgot about the Express Pearl disaster. So when I got the Pulitzer ORN fellowship, I managed to investigate properly. There are 2 aspects of this investigation. One is scientific investigation. The other was the very serious allegations of corruption involving the top of the state officials, government officials. Allegations of corruption involving the Attorney General, who is Sri Lanka's prosecutor general. So Attorney General and Prosecutor General are the same in Sri Lanka. So the Attorney General Department was accused of collusion or taking bribes from the ship owners to disrupt the compensation process, not to get proper compensation. Instead, they were accused of being bribed to interrupt or disrupt the process. It was my opportunity to then to investigate the allegations of corruption as well as the scientific aspect of it. So my investigation, when I'm based in UK. I'm a Sri Lankan journalist, but based in UK. But when I got the fellowship, I actually decided to based myself mostly in Sri Lanka because of the fundamental rights petitions being heard in Sri Lanka, as well as the otherwise. I mean, it's being local. I thought being local would be more advantageous for me. I would be able to get more information gather more information for my investigation. Sri Lanka's the major tool I used for my investigation was Right to Information Act. In Sri Lanka's Right to Information Act is very powerful. Now we can get a lot of information, but as I told you, because the allegations goes up to the level of Attorney General's Department, the state officials were very reluctant to reveal any information. So you had to first file right to information applications, then the authorities, the state officials would get long time to respond. Then you have to, usually the first response would be that they would reject, they would not divulge any information at all. Even other state officials, other government departments were also seeking advice from the Attorney General's department. So none of the government departments were giving out any information at all. So my approach was to not to give up, appeal and lodge appeals and keep filing more and more right to information applications, at the same time building contacts. Because of my BBC experience, as well as being in the ground, I attended almost for the whole year all the court hearings. So attending these court proceedings and building up contacts and speaking to both sides of the story, not only the state officials, not only to the environmentalists, and also to the other part of those representing the ship. I did manage some information. I got some information from open source, but at the same time, being in the ground, I think my approach was helped me to help me to get more information, because all the files filed to for the court proceedings were not supposed to be in public. Only the lawyers representing either of the party were about to get information. But because of my building up contacts and not giving up, I got pretty much the whole file related to the fundamental rights petitions there, and up until today. And the court actually issued a ruling in July, but still up until today, the court process is ongoing, because the Sri Lanka's judiciary ruled $1 billion compensation, but it's ongoing. So, and also I went and met the women collecting noodles, and I met people who filed these fundamental rights petitions. I spoke to fishermen. I spoke to affected communities. As a result, I managed to get a lot of more information that was not in public domain. And another tool that I used was using social media, because sometimes, and most of the times, these state officials did not give you any information, or they were playing with their words, mainly playing with their words. They would not, when I ask how much compensation you filed, they would tell me, Attorney General Department would tell me, this expert committee has recommended this much of compensation. They would not tell you that they have filed action seeking this much of compensation. So what I did, I used social media to post these questions, or write short stories in social media, asking the same questions in public to the posting these same questions in public to the authorities. So in one of my posts, one of those, Sri Lanka's still up until today most popular social media platform is Facebook. So in one of my such a Facebook post was shared by more than 1,000 people. So they were under pressure. The police, the Attorney General Department, they were under pressure. They had to divulge some information. And also for whatever reason, by the time I thought of continuous reportage rather than waiting to file the final report, I kind of posted shorter stories in social media. And also whatever I wrote was posted by a local news channel, website called The Leader. So as a result, both sides later, at a later stage, they actually trusted me to approach me and give more information, because I did not take any side. I wanted to report what was happening and what I hear, and it's exclusive information I was gathering. At the same time, while I was doing my investigation court reporting together with watershed investigations. My colleague Liana Jose, together with her, we also carried out a scientific investigation. We visited Negombo Lagoon and we collected samples. We collected fish samples. We collected plastic noodle samples, and we took these samples to UK, and we gave those samples to Manchester Metropolitan University. They also came up with their results a couple of months later. So we did both sides of the story. While I was mainly covering these court hearings, and together with Liana Jose, we also did the scientific investigation. And as a result, we uncovered lasting toxic legacy for the cargo ship disaster Express Pearl. We reported recently in the BBC as well as in the Guardian. So we were actually there were risks involved, because my safety as well as the safety of my informants was a concern. Lucky for me, change of the government in September 2024 was a better. I mean, it helped me to continue with the investigation. The current government was keen to investigate the alleged corruption, and also I think my experience as a BBC journalist and also my network of contacts helped me a lot. State institutions were, as usual, very reluctant to give information, and at the same time, I also had some challenges in getting our stories into international media, because it has been 4 years since the disaster. It was not a new current issue, but because of the trust building issues, and because of my approach towards being in the ground, and also speaking to all the sides, not both sides, cover a couple the fishermen, affected communities, ship owners, and also the petitioners. I think I've managed to gather enough information to cover the story in full. So at the end of the day, we managed to report the findings in BBC, in Al Jazeera, and in local media. By the time in July this year, by the time Sri Lankan judiciary issued the ruling, I was inundated with lots of requests to cover everything, cover so many stories for the local media. And it is ongoing. As I said, after the fellowship, the issue is not over. The issue it's still there. The corruption issue is still there. The ongoing the impact of the toxic waste is still there. But I think, as Delger said, I will continue to continue even after ORN. I will continue to investigate further, and also I think my other colleagues also will follow our lead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saroj, Delger, and Bjorn. The panelists and I have been busy answering questions via writing, so we already have 23 answered questions. But if you feel that you want more information, please use the Q&A button and we will get to your question. I just wanted to ask some off mic because I thought that they were very interesting and could possibly help other journalists that are conducting investigations. So this first one is for you, Delger. When you look at the data of a research group, right, or somebody that published something in a scientific journal, how do you know which data you can use for stories? Or so how do you know the data that has magic to be turned into a journalism piece?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so what I said in the chat was, I mean, for this project, what I was doing was, I already had like a question that I was curious about. Like, I already had what I thought was a story, and then I went looking for specific data that I felt like I needed to tell that story. But I think, if you don't have an idea yet and you're just like reading these studies, I mean, obviously, like just looking at what they think are the main findings and talking to the scientists themselves is a good place to start. And you can always ask them, like, what else? Like, what do you think are like interesting spin-off topics or angles from this? What else can you do with this data? And then when you're looking at like the data itself, yeah, I mean, I would just try to like visualize it in different ways if you can. Look for big trends like geographic trends. Are there specific places in the ocean where you see kind of like interesting clusterings of things? Are there clear trends over time? What are kind of like, what are the averages? What are the extremes? Yeah, just look for like patterns and trends, I guess. And yeah, and just think of like what's kind of relevant to me, to where I'm reporting on, the topics that I'm reporting on.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and definitely to notice trends is really the journalist's work, right? The next one is for Bjorn, and it asks, what methods and loopholes does Russia use to evade maritime sanctions, according to your observations? And what OSINT tools may be used to detect such activity? Are there any indications that journalists should look for when they are investigating these topics?
Yeah, so we're seeing a large increase in AIS position falsification after the start of the war in Ukraine. So this is affecting vessels that are carrying Russian crude. It's the same, something similar is also happening with vessels going to Venezuela and Iran. And so we've developed some ways to systematically pick out when positions are falsified. One of the principal ones is to do an automated correlation between satellite imagery and the AIS track. So if AIS is showing that the vessel is in a particular location when the satellite passed overhead, but on the satellite image you can't see the vessel there, then that's a clear proof that the AIS position is false. And that's the way we've been able to identify now I think more than 100 tankers that have been, mostly tankers that have been falsifying their AIS. So something like what I was showing with the comparison of imagery and then AIS track on the monitor platform would show that type of falsification. There's some other technical ways of getting at it. For instance, sometimes positions are received outside of the possible receiving footprint. For instance, if we know a receiving satellite is over Venezuela, but the ship's position is on West Africa, then that's too far for it to be picked up, and we know that it's false. And we could do something similar with terrestrial antenna reception as well.
Nice, thank you. And Saroj, a question for you is because you accompanied a big court case, but you were also talking about pollution. And while talking about ocean pollution, you even collected samples. So could you talk a little bit more about that collaboration with academia, who approached who, yeah, the results of these samples and how the partnership worked?
Yeah, Fernanda, actually, yes, because the Sri Lankan authorities also themselves appointed 40-member scientists initially to investigate the aftermath of the Express Pearl disaster. So they were also very disappointed when the Attorney General Department itself was accused of corruption and not helping them with further investigations. So when we approached together with my colleague Liana Hosier, when we approached all of these scientists were very, very keen to help us. So we collected our samples, and then we asked local university, Vayamba University in Sri Lanka, to freeze dry these samples, fish samples, for example. And then we, after the freeze drying process, we approached Manchester University, Metropolitan University. Those scientists, there are no facility in Sri Lanka to test these samples. So we had to bring these samples to UK from there. Luckily, Liana lives in UK, and I also, happen to be traveling between Sri Lanka and London. So we got these samples to this Manchester Metropolitan University. It took a while. We collected samples in November, but we got the results in May this year. So, but still, the results actually revealed that a lasting toxic legacy of plastic noodles. In short, the longer the plastic noodles are in the ocean, the more toxic they are. And these noodles are being consumed by, marine life, fish, for example. And it is, in addition, is toxic to human health. So yes, it was a very good collaboration. All the scientists were very, very happy to help us, Fernanda, because Sri Lankan government had stopped the investigations by the Sri Lankan experts within a year or so, by the end of 2022. According to scientists, the investigation should have been continued up until most likely for up to 10 years. But within 2 years, it was stopped. Because of that, they all were very happy to help us. So there was a very good collaboration between Pulitzer RN and the scientists and the watershed investigations.
Journalism pushing for accountability. Important.
Yes.
And I've been loving ending these webinars with a final note of inspiration from the speakers. So just a final word of your tips and tricks and recommendations to journalists while looking into ocean issues. And maybe we can start with you, Bjorn, and then you guys can popcorn it to each other.
Yeah, I would just say that really the satellite tracking data available has increased so much in the past few years. So 10 years ago, when we started tracking with AIS, there were just a handful of AIS receiving satellites. Now I believe there are more than 100 or around 100, and this is making data so much more detailed. The same is true to some extent of imagery available with new satellites being launched too. So the possibilities of doing more detailed investigation are really opening up with this data.
Over to you, Delger.
I think I would just say that there's like so much opportunity and need for us to cover the ocean, and compared to land, there's so much that is undercovered, hasn't been covered. So I think for all of us, there's just like an endless number of stories out there waiting to be found. And a lot of the like data sources I shared today, they're from the US because that's where I am. But I just want to say that like other countries, not all other countries will have all the same things, but many do have similar data sets or have their own data sets that you can look at. And yeah, so I would just encourage people to look widely for things that they can report on.
Yeah, from me, Fernanda, I think having been a journalist for nearly 3 decades, every new task is a new challenge for me. And I always, every day, learn something new with a new challenge. So don't fear about any challenges, go for it. That's my message. And one more thing I would like to say, Fernanda, I forgot to say, in my experience, in this particular investigation, I learned something more. It is very, very important that, telling the story to the international audience is fine. It's good. It's very good. But at the same time, don't forget your local audience. Vernacular reporting in the local language is very, very important. Because why I'm saying this? Because the support I got after reporting these, my findings, it's immense. Many people are, up until today, giving me more information, asking me more information, pushing me for more. So that's also very, very important. So don't fear any new challenge. Every day is a new challenge. Every new story is a new challenge. Learn with it. Go for it.
Nice. Thank you all so much for taking the time and teaching us all today. Really appreciate it. And a reminder that this recording will be available and will be sent to everybody with the presentations through email. Thank you all so much.
I think one of the things I really like